Chapter 5. Just Getting By. My first real job was at a fast food restaurant. One of Mom's sewing clients was a manager there, so she pulled some strings to get me the job. I lasted 2 days. I was probably around 15, and I did not want a job at all. School and homework was enough to deal with. The loud noises of the kitchen, the crowds of hungry, impatient, and expectant people, and the disorganized keypad on the cash register were, to my senses, horrendously outrageous. There is a huge responsibility that comes with standing at the register. I may have done better if they gave me a photo of the keypad to study and memorize at home. Under pressure, my brain could not remember where the right keys were for specialty items. The whole thing may as well have melted and fused all the keys together into one big key. At least then it would have been simpler. As it was, all I could do when my parents brought me home was go straight to my room, close the door, and cry. Mom was embarrassed that she got me the job and I couldn't stick with it. Dad was disappointed as well. They must have thought I was the laziest kid after that incident. I felt guilty for giving up, but was that any way to live? Were all jobs so hard that I would have to come home and cry every night just to decompress? I felt panicked that this might be what all jobs were like. Life could be very hard, I realized inwardly. That kind of working and crying pattern is too exhausting for me. I could not understand why others could work like that, but not me. I also never wanted to learn how to drive. Dad signed me up for driving school against my will. I do pretty well as a driver currently, but I had quite the resistance to change and to becoming more independent for the longest time. Another job was in a doctor's office. I was around 17 at the time. Sometimes on my first day in a new place, I get so anxious I will be sick to my stomach or run to the toilet because everything is going right through me. So on my first and last day in that office, a woman was explaining all my tasks, but she was talking so fast I couldn't absorb it all. It felt just like in 5th grade when I could not write the questions and answers fast enough. I was trying to retain what she was telling me when I started feeling hot, parched, dizzy, and tingly. I didn't want to interrupt her to ask for water, but she just kept talking without pausing, and then I woke up lying on the floor, looking up at the office staff all around me. The doctor there did an EKG on me, which turned out normal. They were all very concerned because I was out for a long time and my eyes stayed open. Mom and Dad came to get me. I felt a mixture of post-fainting euphoria and embarrassment. I just could not go back and face them all. I certainly didn't want to risk fainting again and waste their time again. I had production jobs too. I worked in a mail sorting facility in the summer after college, which was great, except it made my back hurt. But at least I wasn't dealing with customers there. I also worked at a fence company during this time period. I answered the phone and did filing. The boss did not like it when I took apart electronics such as an adding machine for thorough cleaning. It still worked perfectly when I put it back together, but I took his gruff annoyance as a warning to never do it again. After that, I stayed away from anything that could be taken apart with a screwdriver. Ironically, he became stepfather to the autistic boy I knew as a child. After moving from home to be closer to my college boyfriend, I went to a temp agency and they tried to get me to do an electronics store sales position, which would require me to go away for 6 weeks to train. I turned it down as it did not sound like something I would thrive at, so they gave me a factory job instead. After a few weeks of working in less than optimal conditions, such as bagging sidewalk salt without gloves, canning blue poison roach powder without a mask, and a break room full of smokers, I told the temp agency I could not go back, but I only got the courage to do so when 2 men who worked alongside me from the same agency quit. They said the worst that could happen was they would be reassigned due to the hazardous conditions of the job. We all turned Kleenex blue when we blew our noses after roach poison canning time. The temp agency promptly fired me when I asked for something else. To this day, my wrists pop and have damage from lifting so many heavy poison cans off the conveyor belt repeatedly. I can do about 1 push-up before they start hurting. To make matters worse, I had thrown away my checks because I signed up for direct deposit. I thought the checks were just statements of what I was getting electronically, even though they did resemble checks to me. The manager at the agency was a big, loud, intimidating man. Luckily, a friend who was not afraid as I was went with me and got my checks reissued. Phew. Then I got a job making food in a warehouse kitchen. The company owned 11 grocery stores. I liked it because I did not have to work in the public eye. It was hard work physically, but it gave me muscle. On my first day, I was told to cut up celery with the old ladies. Vegetable cutting was their department. A faint smell of bleach water for soaking veggies filled the air. The one in charge was a no-nonsense kind of woman with little patience and was quick to scold. I had not been told about keeping garbage bags only half full because of the weight of it. A full bag of vegetable trimmings would be way too heavy for a person to lift into the dumpster chute. Since no one told me that specific instruction, my trash bag soon became completely full. The queen bee saw this and yelled at me as she and another old woman struggled to get the bag into the chute. I offered to do it, but she preferred to scold me instead. "You couldn't lift this thing. You pull a stunt like that again and we'll make you do it next time." A stunt? That made it sound like I was doing it on purpose. "No one told me," I tried. "Any fool knows these bags are heavy if they're full. It's common sense," she snapped angrily. With that, I shut my mouth. There was no winning this argument. I turned to the wall to cut more celery as tears stung my eyes. I kept my garbage bags extra small that day so no one could say anything more to me, despite their watchful eyes. What a great first impression I made. Luckily, I did not stay in the vegetable department for long. I soon got assignments to make recipes on my own. One Thanksgiving, I made 1,300 pounds of green bean casserole. Another time, I was cooking stew on a massive kettle. The girl next to me was boiling pasta, and in order to strain out the water, tipped her kettle with a screen over it, as was the norm. She tipped it too fast, though, and boiling water washed over my right foot and into my shoe. She felt horrible, while I felt excruciating pain. Miraculously, there was no blistering, but the skin was very red. I was sent home. So I learned how to drive with my left foot that day. When I moved to another area of the country to plan for the wedding preparations to my college boyfriend, a job at a water company popped up from a temp agency. It was mainly a filing job, which I love, so I took it. On my first day, I got lost and had no cell phone at the time. I actually had a meltdown in my car on the way, thinking of how very late I already was and how they would probably fire me on the spot. I really needed a job. I stopped for directions and found a payphone to let the company know I really was on my way. They sounded unconcerned and told me to come on in. The bosses convinced me to quit the temp agency so they could pay me without the agency fees. They promised me they had enough work for me, but they underestimated my filing skills. In less than 2 months, I had all the files organized. They told me to take a Friday off, which is the day they had their secretary call me and tell me I was no longer needed. Nice. After the wedding and another relocation, I was again searching for a job. A man at church heard I was looking for work and said he was just golfing with a lawyer buddy of his who was thinking of hiring another girl for office help. I got excited. A lawyer's office job sounded prestigious, and I felt sure there would be lots of filing for me to do. I mailed my resume and waited a few days. My parents taught me to always follow up with a phone call because the applicants who show interest have a higher chance of getting the job. So I called the office on a Saturday and left a message. "Hi, this is Julie. I just wanted to make sure you received the resume I sent you and would love to come in for an interview if possible. Please give me a call. Thanks." Monday evening, I stood at the stove, stirring organic cheese powder into macaroni. It looked and smelled so good. My phone rang and I recognized the lawyer's number. I felt even more excited because here he was getting back to me so fast. Instead, he started yelling at me. Apparently, what he talked about during his golf game was confidential. "Now all the ladies in the office are upset," he railed, "and it's been a horrible day dealing with them all." Yikes. I stuttered in shock. "Oh, and by the way," he interjected, "I did look at your resume, and it sucks. You have no legal experience, no significant computer skills, an incomplete college degree. There's nothing impressive about this piece of paper, and I wouldn't have hired you anyway." He slammed the phone down on my mumbled apology. As I finished stirring the now pathetic macaroni, for which I no longer had an appetite, tears ran down my face. Why did it seem like people were always mad at me for things I did not do with any intention to harm? Why did it hurt so deeply? It was an innocent misunderstanding. From what I heard later, he chewed out his friend who had told me about the opportunity. Church guy apologized to me for his part. "It's okay," I said bleakly. My next job was as a chiropractic assistant, which included front desk duties simultaneously. In my interview, the doctor said I was the perfect one for the position out of dozens of applicants. He asked how I was with sales. I told him I had no clue, but I would try my best. I was hired. He made me memorize a script for making sales to draw in patients while taking people's blood pressure. I was not that great at sales, it turns out. Half the people already had a chiropractor. As for the rest, I could not seem to connect or relate to them. I think it takes a little more than a memorized script to turn over a sale, especially in person. If I am putting all my brain power into recalling the script, I can't connect with the person at the same time. He also had me do x-rays, electric stimulation pads, ultrasound therapy, and strap people into the decompression machine. After a while, he complained that I hid behind the desk too much and was too quiet. He watched me with eagle eyes. He intimidated me so much that I became flustered and nervous around him. He asked why I could not be warm and personable like his other receptionist, who was on maternity leave at the time. I had no answer for that. He sent me outside for the embarrassing job of using a 3-story pole to try and slap letters up on his sign on a busy street corner. One wrong move and that pole would fall into the intersection, causing a crash. I tried for 30 minutes to get the letters to stick, but all I got were honks, whistles, and hoots from men driving by. Thoroughly humiliated, I retreated inside to report that I lacked the coordination and strength to get the letters to stick. Of course, the doctor was an expert at it and made it look easy. He seemed amused at my plight. The final straw was when he had a meeting in his office with my new husband and I. He reported all his complaints against me, including all the sales I lost, which in his mind added up to tens of thousands of dollars. "Well, at least between $20,000 to $40,000, he announced seriously. My husband turned and looked at me. "That's a lot of money," he exclaimed. I was so taken aback, I did not know what to say. Who does that? Who gangs up on an employee with their spouse? I lasted 4 months at that job, which, if you ask me, was way too long. I spent the next 5 months looking for a job when finally a clerical assistant job opened up. It had my name written all over it. I worked there 6 months. In the meantime, I was taking an at-home course in medical transcription. I figured it was the perfect skill to have for someone who did not do well with the public. I realized quickly that transcription is very hard. Most doctors talk low volume and fast, using medical terminology, basically its own language, and a lot of them have foreign accents, making it very hard to decipher what they're talking about. So an outsourcing company option, while allowing me to work at home, required more skill and experience. As a result, I got a job at a privately owned surgical center. Despite having a wacky, socially inappropriate coworker who was appointed to serve as a transcription mentor of sorts to me, I enjoyed working in the quiet basement. When the file clerk was on maternity leave, I got to do her job too. Oh, how I love filing things. If I lived in a bigger city right now, I would probably be doing it. Those positions are few and far between in a small town. I spent a year and a half typing transcription there until there was a misunderstanding over an email I sent about my computer not working properly. The computer department thought I was giving them attitude. I was just trying to let them know it needed attention. Anyway, my supervisor demoted my title over the incident, and I felt as if they all turned on me after that. Everything felt out of harmony. I could not stand being there anymore. On my way to work one day, I saw a Help Wanted sign and applied. It was a position helping special needs clients in both community outings and residential care. I liked the idea of helping people in need, and although my ideal job is not working with people, I felt it might help me develop better social skills, patience, and it would save me from my current spoiled transcription job. I was hired immediately. They have high turnover rates because not everyone has the patience for that type of work. I received so much training during the first 2 weeks, my head was spinning. There was incident management, redirection, crisis prevention and intervention, gentle self-defense, CPR, first aid, diabetes training, and basic fire and sanitary safety. I also had a 2-day medication training required for residential care workers so we could administer pills to the clients. I did refuse the catheter training, though. I did not feel it was ethical to do so unless I were a nurse. These trainings gave me tremendous skills, not only for clientele, but also to better understand and interact with people in general, and most of all, in personal relationship issues too. I worked with many types of clients with differing mental and physical conditions and needs. It kept me on my toes. There were sweet, funny moments, and there were uncomfortable, scary moments. Most of the interactions were pleasant, and I found myself endeared to the clients, as if they were family. But I always kept a professional boundary as I had been trained to do. One day, I was sent to a house to work with a boy who had autism. I could not make him focus on anything such as numbers, letters, colors, or tying his shoes. I had no training or experience with autism, yet felt I understood him somehow, watching him living in his own world, something I wanted to do more of myself. His mom hovered and nitpicked at my lack of methods. A retired school teacher, she had more skill in this arena than I did. She basically questioned why I was there if I had no way of connecting with her son. She was very blunt towards me, and I could feel her disappointment in my being there. As I drove away, I cried all the way back to the office. I felt I had just escaped a criticism torture chamber. I later found out my boss should have gone instead of sending me. She sheepishly admitted that autism was her field of study, but that no one wanted to deal with his mom. Luckily, I was not asked to go back. There were one-on-one outings, and then there were group outings such as bowling, ball games, movies, etc. One girl I took out once a week was blind, nonverbal, and liked to eat inedible things such as her own hair and toilet products. The job held a massive amount of responsibility. I worked for the agency 3 years before moving away. After the big move, I spent 6 months at another facility that helped special needs clients. I mostly worked at their day program. There was a one-on-one client who was a girl with autism. One day, I took her for pizza at her family's request, and she bolted out the back door of the place into an alley street. She zipped around private homes, laughing with glee. It took me forever to catch her, and was quite embarrassing. Also, I'm sure she knew I was not allowed to pull her with me, and coaxing her back to the car was not easy at all. Since I still had no training for connecting with a person on that end of the spectrum, I was at a huge loss on what to do. In the day program of the facility, they paired me with their hardest client, a boy who was autistic with Down syndrome, diabetic with sensitive blood sugar issues, and liked to yell, hit, and scratch himself and others. His screams were like nails on a chalkboard to me. Anything could set him off into a tantrum. He once had a full-on meltdown in a video store, and we had to call his parents to come get him. Working with him was extremely challenging for me. Since he never trusted me or took a liking to me, I could no longer work with him, which meant I was out of a job again. In desperation, I took a job as a waitress. I lasted 1 month there. I loved the paycheck, but was unable to meet the insane multitasking requirements. I got so overwhelmed that I got orders wrong or forgot things. I ran around with a worried, frazzled look on my face instead of a smile. I felt guilty that I could only handle maybe 3 tables at a time, and the other servers resented me for that. It meant they had to work harder to cover what I could not. I quit before I had another job lined up, which is not like me at all. That is how badly I felt doing the job. The stress of constant overstimulation was just too much for me. My boss tried to convince me I could adapt and get better at it, but I just knew intuitively that would never happen. I got another job within a few weeks. I interviewed for hotel housekeeping, but the manager offered me the front desk position instead. I agreed because I knew housekeeping was a hard job physically. It was a high-end place with huge rooms and impeccable standards, which took almost 3 hours to clean. I did well at the job and enjoyed all the free gourmet food. It was part-time and a small hotel, so it was not too overwhelming for me. Everyone was nice, and it seemed like a small family. The manager always did what he could to make everyone happy at their job. After 6 months, I left there to go to another state, also for 6 months, and while I was relocated, I worked as a hotel breakfast attendant. I had tried to get a yoga teaching position because when I moved across the country, I had completed a 1-month yoga teacher training. I was never really into yoga, but I was once again simply trying to acquire a skill set to support myself with. In a big city now, I figured I would have no trouble finding work as a yoga teacher. I called every yoga studio listing I could find online in that city. None of them seemed interested in me. Many were snobby and rude. I got a few "come take a class so we can see if we like you" answers, but I did not have the extra money and time to do all that. I needed a job now. One woman grilled and chastised me for not having proper knowledge of the history of yoga masters. After hanging up, I cried for a long time. Here I was in a new city trying to survive, and she had to rub salt in the wound. She was just so mean about it. Her words, tone, and attitude were like daggers in my heart. So, breakfast attendant it was. I hated getting up at 4:30 a.m., but it was a paycheck. At the end of those 6 months, I returned to where I had been living before and got my old job at the hotel back. Phew! I stayed there over 6 years, during which time I completed metaphysical-based schooling, past life regression training, and a Reverend Doctorate of Metaphysical Psychology. I also started my own LLC and built a basic website. I wanted to be a spiritual counselor. I also studied with a meditation teacher for 8 months. However, with no budget to advertise and no hired hand to boost my website and do all the technical stuff, I was lost. I did publish a couple little ebooks, made meditation videos, and posted them online. Anytime I put out ads on social media, I actually got negative feedback despite the positive energy I was putting into it all. I did get an invitation to lead a group meditation on a large conference call of meditation center owners from around the world. The leader of the group found my meditation videos and was impressed. I was honored to be chosen and took it as a sign I was finally on the right track. As I was being introduced, a man on the call said he looked me up just then, and there wasn't much to my website and I didn't have many views on my videos. The man running the call said, "Well, she does have a lot of videos. So go ahead, Julie, lead us in a meditation now." I was, in a word, mortified. What a way to shatter the confidence of a person who is trying to start her spiritual career and help others in the process, and to leave the struggle of day jobs in the dust once and for all. There was no time to lament. I was on the spot. I launched right into a 5-minute meditation in my soft, soothing voice with all the confidence and spiritual presence needed for such a task. When it was over, all anyone could say was, "Wow." The guy who called me out for essentially being a nobody did apologize in an email later that day. I forgave him in my reply, noting there are certain times for certain comments, and that was not the time to bring up my internet popularity status, as it had nothing to do with the meditation we experienced together. Nothing ever came of the opportunity, even though I had given it my best shot. After a couple years, I dissolved the LLC and deleted the ebooks, videos, and website because I had not made the funds to even pay for ads and yearly fees to keep the site and LLC afloat. I was just using money from my day job to pay for it all. I felt it was a lesson to teach me that things like this unfold on their own, regardless of ads, social media, websites, etc. To expect anything else was naive. I was trying instead of allowing. I also volunteered with a hospice company for a few months. It was something I had always wanted to do. I thought maybe I could become a hospice chaplain if I got my foot in the door as a bonus opportunity. I still had my Reverend card at the time. I quickly realized, however, all the paperwork and red tape was too much of a headache. As far as the visits, I could not schedule them as I had hoped. I had mornings free, but that was prime time for doctor and nurse visits, so the position ate into my 1 or 2 days off, and that was just not going to work for me. I had to give it up. After 6 long years at the hotel, I got to the point of wearing too many hats. I started to resent all my coworkers, the multitasking and social interaction requirements. I just couldn't take it anymore. Another final straw occurred when I was checking chlorine levels for the pool. I do not feel anyone but a pool professional should be doing that job. I needed to add a chlorine tablet to the filtering system. I opened the tube and the bucket containing the chlorine tablets. There was rainwater in the bucket, and the tablets release gas when they are wet. So I got an unhealthy dose of chlorine gas from either the tube or the bucket of wet tablets right into my eyes and lungs. Everything felt like it was burning. I did go to a clinic the next day, and the doctor asked if I had a family history of collapsed lung. I could only take a shallow breath before a sharp pain would hit my left lung. I decided to give it 1 more day before going to the ER. After taking special herbs, my lung actually healed on its own. My boss sent me back for x-rays a couple weeks later, and luckily, the lung was just fine by then. Months later, I turned in my resignation. A photographer I knew, as he had worked part-time at the hotel for a stretch, asked me to help him shoot a wedding job as an assistant, and I said yes. What I did not realize is that he would hand me a huge camera, explain the 50 or so functions it had, and expect me to be an expert after a 30-minute tutorial by him. I had never known a camera could have so many functions. I had no idea what he was talking about or how I was supposed to memorize each setting for the plethora of situations that awaited me the next day. I needed to see each function in action about 20 times and take notes on it all in order to really know that camera, but we did not have that kind of time. He went over a big pile of flashcards with me about never crossing him in the moment or questioning what he asked me to do, as things happen fast and sweet photo opportunities can be missed very easily. He also wanted me to do the bride walking down the aisle shots. The combination of these 2 tasks, knowing a foreign camera and getting the perfect shot of the bride in the midst of a big crowd, caused me to have an emotional meltdown that evening in my hotel room. My beloved called me to see how it was going in the middle of my tear fest. He had never seen or heard me like this, and he was worried. He tried to calm me and assured me I could just tell the guy I would not do the aisle shots, that it was too much to expect of me. The realization that I could say no had not occurred to me. I just needed someone to point out the obvious in a gentle way, so the next day I whined about it until the photographer agreed that it was too much for me. I am glad he agreed because after he looked at all the shots, he didn't like the ones I took. He and I have different artistic shooting styles. Add to that the fact I was using a piece of equipment I knew almost nothing about, and who could be surprised? As I was preparing to leave my hotel job, I remembered a friend who owns a company that ships out supplements from online sales. I emailed him asking if he needed help in the shipping department. I knew that would be the least socially interactive job I could find and would give me a chance to relax again in my day-to-day existence, a chance to catch my breath. I was so tired after 6 years at the hotel. It turned out my friend was going to publish an ad that very day for help wanted. There was only one catch. I would be on the phones and chat system for customer service as well, because shipping would not provide full-time hours. Multiple hats. Not ideal, but I knew it would be calmer than the hotel, so I was hired. I was mostly in the office by myself, except for a few hours the accountant was there every week. I did cry once in a while when people were so rude to me on the phone, upset about things beyond my control. It would take me a couple hours to recover from it every time it happened. My boss said I was perfect at the job and he wanted to clone me. I organized the entire office and all its email systems. After a while, things got too slow and I worried that payroll would not have the funds to pay me. Although the money always appeared at the last minute, it was too stressful for me to feel like I was hanging on the edge of a cliff every 2 weeks, waiting to see when the money would come in. I lasted there 8 months. So I decided to go even simpler with my next attempt. I could be a busser. It would be quite the pay cut, but I told myself that if I could get full time, perhaps it wouldn't be so bad. So I went to interview at a retirement home to work in their cafeteria. I told them I could not be a server, as my brain just didn't process well under the multitasking requirements of such a position. So I was hired to bus tables. My first and last day on the job, I arrived and found, to my horror, that bussers were required to not only fill waters and bus tables, but to also know each person's name, where they sat, and what they normally drank before they ever sat down. The facility served a few hundred people a day between lunch and dinner. Add to that the dozens of silly rules they had about doing things a certain way, only using certain glasses for certain beverages, only filling them to a certain mark on the glass, even setting the tables in a certain order. And it was a recipe for disaster. I felt like a server, and it was my worst nightmare. I was so turned around, getting tables mixed up and fumbling and spilling things. The older woman training me scoffed at every tiny mistake I made. She treated me like a child. I felt humiliated and was barely holding back tears. Every time I went to scrape plates as I was trained to do, the dishwasher came over to butt me out of his space. I don't know why he did not like me, but he made it quite clear that he disapproved of me being there. I just wanted to run outside into the hills and sit there until nature ravaged my body with its extremes. On my lunch break, I went to my car and bawled my eyes out. I did not want to go back inside that day, much less any other day. Still, I had to finish the day out amid tears I could no longer hold back. People noticed, I'm sure. At the end of my shift, I sat down with the manager and told her I was very sorry for wasting her time, but that I could not handle the job. She told me to sleep on it and text her in the morning. She thanked me for finishing out the day and noted that several people in the past had gone to lunch and not come back. After this blow, I was concerned for my future. What was I going to do if I could not even handle a low-wage job? Was there any help out there for me? What was I going to do for employment tomorrow? Once I got home and composed myself, I reached out to a friend who offered me a position in her art gallery, but things were slow there too. At my beloved's suggestion, I started offering myself to friends as a house cleaner and organizer. I do love organizing after all. My art gallery friend was the first to sign up for my services and told 2 others who were searching for someone reliable. Before I knew it, I had a full schedule. I remember just how clumsy and uncoordinated I can be as I use my body for work, especially if I'm rushing. At last, I am free of answering phones, running an office, or working in a restaurant. I know this is not a forever job. Although it is better pay, I can only work a few hours a day before my entire body is aching. So it amounts to about the same income I had before, only now I'll be paying taxes on it too. That's okay. I have more time in my day to put effort into other creations. With time, those things may be profitable. If I could offer advice on getting a job for those on the ASD spectrum, I would say to explore the skills you are good at as young as possible. Doing what you love is a great start to find a way to earn money without the stresses of working in a whatever you can find job. It also helps those with ASD to have a loved one explain calmly, lovingly, and encouragingly the specifics of why finding a skill set they love is so important to their ability to thrive. Otherwise, they may not follow through. I know I didn't. Pushing too hard will create resistance and confusion, so it has to flow in love. Also, know your limits. I interview very well because I am rested and ready. I give a good first impression due to my ability to mask any quirks that are not socially acceptable. That makes the interviewer think I am normal socially and can handle multitasking and social interaction. That facade cannot hold up forever, though. It is not sustainable long term because it is not the real me. In the end, we all take responsibility for making our own decisions, no matter where we are, on the autism spectrum or not.